Welcome to the Raptor News channel. The most critical day of the war has begun. The Israeli army crossed the Gaza border. Hamas organization directed 35,000 fighters to the border. As Israel's intense bombardment continued, the first confrontation took place within the borders of Gaza and a major conflict broke out. Israeli tanks moved to the border and artillery units started intense fire. Assistant commanders of the Hamas terrorist organization were captured, and tensions were higher than ever. Hamas suffered a record number of casualties, which fueled the war. Israel's mobilization caused both Hezbollah and Hamas to go on the offensive. Did the tension on the borderline cause the start of the ground operation? Let's move on to our video without wasting time. Firstly, with the increase in the military presence of Israeli forces, the tension on the borderline has been quite high for about 5 days. Israeli forces have organized the most comprehensive air operations of the last period with warplanes for 2 days. Hamas commanders and dispatch points are in the target. While Hamas suffered a lot of losses, the increase in the military presence on the borderline led to the outbreak of clashes in the evening hours. Firstly, while the Israeli army continued routine checks in the Maghazi area, fire was opened at the Israeli checkpoint. In a short time, Israeli forces moved westwards from the point where the fence was located. Very fierce clashes broke out east of Maghazi. As I mentioned, Israel's military presence on the border is very high. When Hamas militants opened fire, Israeli infantry began to advance towards Maghazi and the fighting shifted towards the urban area. As you can see on the map, Israeli forces began to make progress and create a corridor. In the meantime, Hamas started to advance towards Kisufim, located in the southeast of the region, with the lockdown of clashes in the Maghazi region. Hamas started to attack Israeli territory from the borderline, but it was observed that members of the organization started to pass through the fence. In this process, Israeli forces organized counterattacks in a controlled manner and gradually withdrew. With the withdrawal of the soldiers, very intense artillery shelling started to be organized on the borderline. With the start of the artillery shelling, the Hamas organization on the borderline lost 18 fighters and began to deploy in the region, moving away from the border area. After the first clashes, a major attack broke out. Israeli Defense Ministry announced that 1 soldier was wounded when Hamas opened fire. At the end of about half an hour of silence, activity started at 2 points where the Israeli army was most strongly deployed on the borderline. Near Erez border crossing and Stero, it was observed that Israeli tanks opened fire east of Beit Hanun. While the tank fire continued, Israeli warplanes started bombing Beit Hanun and its surroundings. It is known that there are many Hamas members around the city. While airstrikes were being organized, Hamas fighters began to fire intensively at Israeli troops on the borderline. In this process, Israeli forces officially crossed the Gaza border and fierce clashes began to take place. But it is worth noting that no announcement was made that ground operations had begun. It was stated that 1 Israeli soldier was slightly injured as the clashes continued. Later, from the north of the point where the first attacks were organized, the Israeli troops began to advance towards the conflict zone. It was reported that 4 Hamas members were neutralized as Israeli forces opened crossfire. As Hamas members retreated towards the city, Israeli forces returned behind the fence. Since there is no official statement for land operations, both sides are cautious. But since the tension has increased a lot in the border area, I can say that clashes have started. With the start of clashes on the borderline, the most comprehensive air operation of the last period started in this process. With the mobilization of the Israeli Air Force, airstrikes were carried out on 240 separate points. There were successive explosions in Hamas dispatch points, ammunition depots, assembly areas, and Hamas camps in almost all of the Gaza Strip. While 4 Hamas camps were destroyed in Jabalia and Beit Lahia points near Gaza, the biggest attack was carried out in Khan Yunis region. A fuel depot in Khan Yunis, which is actively used by Hamas, exploded as a result of the attack. With the violence of the explosion, Hamas camps and gathering areas in the vicinity were rendered unusable. It was reported that 54 Hamas members were neutralized in a single attack. Simultaneously, Hamas positions located in the east of Khan Yunis area, close to the borderline, were destroyed by Israeli artillery. A major airstrike was launched on the northwest of Al-Maghazi area, where the first ground attack started. While intensive airstrikes were organized in the Bureje and Nuseirat regions, it was reported that one Hamas gathering area was destroyed while being used by Hamas commanders. According to the statements made, with the realization of the airstrikes, 3 Hamas deputy commanders lost their lives, while more than 20 Hamas members were neutralized. In this process, airstrikes were organized from the northernmost to the southernmost part of Gaza, while Israeli artillery units bombarded points close to the borderline. According to the statement made by the Israeli General Staff, it was officially confirmed that 180 members of the Hamas terrorist organization were neutralized as a result of the air and artillery attacks in recent hours. With Hamas suffering a record number of casualties, fighting broke out in northern Israel. Members of the Hezbollah terrorist organization began launching mortar attacks along the southern Lebanese border. Hezbollah militants tried to target Israeli outposts located close to the borderline. Many mortar attacks were organized, but most of the attacks did not reach the targets. However, it was announced that one mortar hit the defense wall of the Israeli Pranit barracks near the Baram forest. No one was killed or injured in the attacks. Hezbollah's mortar attacks caused material damage in the region. As the attacks continued, Israeli forces fired lighting flares near Shlomi, where Hezbollah launched its first mortar attack. In addition, an Israeli army drone began flying over southwestern Lebanon in order to detect Hezbollah positions and camps. Within a very short time, Israeli warplanes mobilized. Airstrikes were launched against all Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, which had launched attacks across the border. It was also observed that the Hamas camp in the Rameik region was intensively shelled by Israeli artillery. Likewise, 2 Israeli warplanes targeted the area around Kafr Shuba in the eastern part of Lebanon with 4 missiles. Later, it was observed that 3 Israeli drones re-entered Israeli territory, carrying out more than 6 attacks on targets in Kafr Shuba. No official announcement has been made for ground operations, but the first ground clashes have started as of today. Near the Sderot point, Israeli forces crossed the fence for the first time and clashes began. After Hamas militants opened fire, a large number of tanks and artillery systems shelled Hamas targets. In addition, Israeli warplanes destroyed critical targets in Gaza, neutralizing 3 Hamas deputy commanders. The hitting of the fuel depot located on Khan Yunis seems to cause Hamas to have problems with shipment. The tension between Israel and Palestine is increasing day by day. We have come to the end of another video. We will continue to convey the events in the following hours to you, quickly and accurately. We continue to convey the events to you objectively. You can like the videos to support us. You can also subscribe to the channel to make it easier to follow new videos. I wish you all happy days. See you soon.